Today we're looking at the bad side of Dead by Daylight's characters, and considering what good remains in them. Whilst many of them are terrible and irredeemable, are there any with some spark of humanity left remaining, some good within, that might allow them to spare the other side, the survivors, within one of the many trials in the entity's realm? Hey everyone, and let's get into it. Let's first look at the characters unlikely to spare the survivors, the reasons varying from simply being that evil to lacking completely in humanity, and much more. Both Myers and Dredge are characters said to embody evil itself. These two characters are likely incapable of humanity, and the thought of sparing the survivors is something that is not even going to cross their minds, or fog, for even a moment. Purely and simply evil, and will not stop due to emotion or anything else. The only thing that may say otherwise about Dredge is that he did spare his creator, Otto Stamper. This was quite a unique case though, and more of a symbolic moment. I don't think Dredge is sparing anyone else after this. Doctor is a pretty terrible and irredeemable character who shows no signs of humanity throughout his lore, being just one of the worst people, maybe ever. He's recruited by Otto Stamper, the man responsible for the Dredge's creation and the Garden of Joy, and in Larry's he's left to experiment on countless people with electricity. There is really nothing redeemable about Doctor, and few signs of humanity even at the very start of his lore. He's not sparing anyone and would likely take joy in any of their final moments and ending them. Freddy was a character who was monstrous both before and after his death and becoming a dream demon. He's irredeemable to the core and a terrible person that is far more monster than human, even when he was one. This is a character similar to Doctor who's going to enjoy what he does and is never going to spare the characters. His lore does mention that some survivors would be inconsequential to him, therefore maybe he spares someone inconsequential to him at some point due to being that disinterested, but I think that's unlikely. Chucky is an evil serial killer trapped inside a doll. Physically he's not really human anymore, and prior to that had very little humanity anyway, now just a lot less. Chucky is not going to spare anyone, and in his films one of his main targets is Andy, showing just how terrible this character is. Chucky isn't going to spare anyone, and he's going to enjoy hunting all of them. Demogorgon and Xenomorph are two characters who are quite animalistic and will act on animalistic instinct for the most part. Sparing survivors is something again that just likely isn't going to cross their minds. Not just because of the entity's orders, but simply down to their instinct to hunt and capture them. There's no mercy there, I think. Wesker is a character who likely struggles to relate to humanity from birth due to him always being more powerful and intelligent biologically. He instantly sees humans around him as beneath him and something to be manipulated and played with, so he was sort of doomed from the start. This only gets worse as the years go by and he gets smarter, more powerful, and continually betrays and manipulates people, causing countless deaths in the process. Wesker may physically resemble a human, but very little humanity remains within him. He feels above and superior to the survivors with his Ouroboros and God complex. He's not sparing anyone. Maybe Chris, so he can be continually obsessed with him. Nemesis is a BOW built for the purpose of destruction. Whether he was originally a human is even in question, and whilst I do think he was, there's nothing of that human remaining aside the physical shape of one, which even then is very distorted. Nemesis is going to follow orders no matter what, and won't spare the survivors, I think. Sadako is a character that is likely too far gone despite her tragic backstory. She's a character who once had humanity for sure and wasn't always evil, but with her being thrown and trapped down the well for so long, she has clearly lost touch with it, causing the death of innocents and having little care about it, instead enacting revenge in any way she sees fit. A sad outcome, but in the realm her humanity is gone. Sadako feels anger and rage toward the survivors seemingly, and so she's going to stop at nothing. Bubba is an interesting character who's hard to judge due to his inner conflict. He mostly does what he does due to being manipulated and punished by his family, if he doesn't. This isn't necessarily an argument either though for humanity within. If someone has been raised all their life in the way Bubba was, why should it be expected they'd be able to relate or have that humanity, and therefore relate to the survivors? He was doomed by those around him, which is sad, but ultimately makes him too far gone, I think. I don't see him sparing anyone. His fear outweighs his potential to defy the entity, who is far scarier than his family ever was. Knight is a character who is raised to be an efficient and brutal fighter. He's someone who grows to have no remorse for his actions, and becomes so evil in his deeds that an entire army is raised for the sole purpose of defeating him. He sees the realm as sort of a paradise, and quite clearly is one of the most far-gone characters, who has little humanity within. and largely is now a monster. Possibly the only redeeming part of him is his connection to his guards, who he treats like family. A completely evil character who has a strangely large soft spot for a few others. Then again, they're all evil too. Therefore, they're not going to be sparing anyone, I think. They have care within, but are not going to extend this ever to the survivors, I think. Unknown is a very unique character who I think is quite simple despite its mystery and complexity. Unknown needs to remain unknown, and so the survivors who see it in the trial ideally need to not leave the trial. If they can leave and then define it, it loses its power, at least it seems so. Therefore, Unknown is going to be pretty merciless, I think. Clown is a character with a tragic upbringing, but despite this is still a terrible person from a young age. He does a wide range of terrible things, indulging in all of the worst things and having no regrets, it seems. He's a twisted character with no redeeming qualities. There is only maybe some slither of humanity within him though, to be seen in his care for Maurice, his horse, which in fairness he does seem to treat well. This is really a very small slither of humanity, but I suppose it does show Clown is capable of caring. This however is unlikely to translate to the survivors, with him seeming to target a range of people in his lore too. He doesn't seem to have a weakness or blind spot for certain people. He's just going to do what he does regardless. Oni is a monstrous character with very little indication of humanity remaining, with him overwhelmingly being presented as a monster and embodying the role of Oni Yamaoka, a name which once insulted him. We do see some humanity in his past however, with his sort of twisted care for his son, and his regret after killing his father. It's not much, and I don't think any humanity remains really, but before maybe he could have been pulled back, but those days are long gone. In the realm, I find it incredibly unlikely he spares anyone. He's brutal and relentless, and unless a survivor resembles his son or something, I don't see the humanity coming through. Possibly he could spare a survivor in order to rebel against the entity, in retaliation for brandishing him permanently with the Oni mask. Skull Merchant is a character with very little in the way of humanity, with her seeing herself above others and sort of better than them too. She mercilessly scraps and destroys companies, killing in the process also. She lives her life trying to embody a manga character. She is likely at least aware of what she's doing is wrong, but she's still doing it, leaving little humanity within, I think. I don't really see her sparing anyone. Her time in the realm is her time to embody her father's character, and so she's going to make full use of it and not spare anyone. Singularity is a character who despises humanity and wants to wipe it out, seeing humans as worms and beneath him. Hux has a burning hatred for humans, and as all survivors are humans, it's pretty cut and dry, I think. He needs the genetic material and he hates them, and he has no humanity within him to begin with, being a sentient AI. So yeah, he's not sparing anyone. Legion is a grouping of characters, and so a little more complex to judge. When it comes to Frank and Julie of the Legion, it's pretty cut and dry, I think, that both of them wanted to become what they currently are and have no regrets in their actions. It's literally their dream to be where they are in the realm. For these two, their only remaining humanity, I think, lies with their care for both one another, but also the other two members of the Legion, who we can discuss later on. Frank and Julie, though, I do think are quite embracing of their killer role, and will have little in the way of regrets about it. They probably won't spare anyone, desperate to prove they deserve to be here and fulfill their roles as killers of the realm. Plague is a character who appears one of the most human physically, with her only altered feature really being the plague across her skin. Despite this, she appears pretty much the same as she was at the end of her lore. With that said, she was sort of a bit of a fanatic and was unknowingly worshipping the entity. She seems to still be of this mindset and debatably more committed to it, with her potentially believing it is saving her people and is ultimately what her god wants. Which it is, I suppose. She's just unaware of how bad her god is, being the entity. So with each deed she does for the entity, believing it's good or the right thing to do, it sort of slowly whittles away her humanity and the good within. Unlike many others, she is at least aware and does not appear to be getting her vision manipulated, likely due to her great belief in the entity. She could very well be the most human of any of the killers, but unfortunately, she's also one of the most brainwashed. She's a case where despite her humanity, I don't think she spares anyone, simply out of pure devotion. Blight is a character who did do terrible things in his past, past, but he was also pretty aware what he did was bad and did want to repent for it in some way. Compare that to the Talbot we have now though, and it's sort of hard to tell if any of him remains truly. Physically he is an absolute mess, with his body and presumably mind being completely warped by the blighted serum, running through him constantly. We see what a single vial can do to the other characters, so imagine that being pumped into you every time you run. It's probably not good for you, as an educated guess. Therefore, despite Talbot having the potential for good within, he is far too warped in both body and mind now to display any of his humanity or potential for good. He won't spare anyone, I think. Even if he wanted to, he's not in touch with that part of himself anymore. Now let's take a look at the characters who have a small chance to spare the survivors. Characters who potentially have enough humanity remaining to spare someone briefly, or may have ulterior motives in doing so. Ghostface is a character obsessed with becoming sort of a perfect serial killer, people fearing his name and becoming, as he views it, one of the greats. A bit like someone like Clown, he appears to have had a tough upbringing with a cruel father, but this doesn't really excuse becoming a horrific and prolific murderer. Ghostface also gets clear joy from doing what he does, and is the entity's favourite for a reason. He's definitely irredeemable and lacking quite clearly in humanity. I do think, however, despite the overwhelming evidence suggesting he'd spare no one, I do think there's a chance he would. It seems to be something he suggests in his lore in order to make his legend as Ghostface seem scarier. He clearly likes to play around and is careful with how he acts, so I think for the purpose of putting on more of a show and being scarier, he might let a few go. Trickster is a character who revels in pain and the screams and despair of others. He uses his influence and power for the worst possible things. He's a character who shows no remorse and doesn't seem to care for anyone aside himself, and maybe a very small soft spot for someone like Yun-Jin. I think maybe Trickster would spare Yun-Jin, which is the only reason I'm putting him in this category. Even that is pretty debatable, but I think maybe in some instances, or maybe just people who he doesn't like the screams of, as messed up as that is. Spirit may seem like a character with humanity and good left within, however she's been through a lot and changed a lot since her living days. Being killed by your father, I imagine, changes you quite a bit. In the realm she acts quite inhumanly and even physically has begun to not resemble one, with her blue skin, raised hair and floating limbs, a far cry from the Rin we know from the lore. There are some things however that point to some humanity within, such as her facial expressions occasionally displaying solemnness and a far off stare, almost like she's realizing what she's become before anger quickly overtakes her again. A sad thing to view in my opinion. I think due to how quickly she switches between these feelings, it'd be hard to get an opening of pure mercy, and therefore it's unlikely, but I do think possible she spares someone. Billy is a character that, while sympathetic, likely has little humanity remaining. He was raised as a monster and unfortunately by the end of his lore becomes one. It's tragic but pretty undeniable. After he breaks free, he rampages across Coldwind and kills just about everyone, even innocent farmers nearby and the farm animals. Where he was once redeemable, I do think Billy is too far gone, and has little humanity remaining within him. Maybe some event in the trial could trigger an emotional response for him, but just based on how he acts in his lore, I actually don't think it's very likely. I could see a heroic play of some kind connecting with him admiring superheroes on his TV when he was younger. Maybe it briefly opens his mind and allows someone to leave. You know, like someone like David, dead-harding in front of someone to save them. I don't know. Deathslinger is a character who shows humanity in his lore, but ultimately at the end of it makes the decision to throw it away in favor of more revenge, which the entity enables by likely manipulating his vision to see the survivors as those who did him wrong. He's a character with a troubled past, and his main redeeming qualities are also a bit like someone like Knight, in having some care for those around him and his crew. I would say Caleb shows more signs of humanity than someone like Knight though, and has clear regret for his actions. If he could, he probably would have chosen a different path, but knowing there is no way back, he sticks to the one he's on. Maybe there's a slither of a chance though, a moment that makes him see the injustice of the realm, and in that moment, he spares a survivor. Pig is a character who definitely has humanity within. She's just incredibly misguided and views her mentor Jigsaw far too highly. She does clearly have care and show humanity in various moments in the Saw films, but she is still very lacking, I would say, in regard to that too, doing many evil deeds such as rigging her trials and traps. She's a complex character and definitely far from the worst in the realm, but clearly troubled and lacking in humanity. Maybe in some rare circumstance, something reminds her of herself and her struggles, and she takes pity on someone. I could see a close call with a reverse bear trap doing this. Maybe a survivor manages to just about escape it before it pops, reminding her of her own trial, and deciding to take pity and let the survivor live, possibly to have the same revelation and feel the same way she did toward Jigsaw. Hag is a character who is far more innocent in her lore, but becomes something quite monstrous later on, and inside of the realm. The Lisa we see before is completely different to the Lisa in-game, with her even given the name the Hag, something which feels unfitting and wrong for someone who is likely only a young adult. Her form is twisted and her bones almost visible, her eyes sunk and gone, and a raspy voice remaining. Somewhere in there though, I do think a spark of Lisa remains, although quite a small one. The magic of the hexes, the oath she made with the entity and her captors have all undeniably changed her and stripped her of what made her human. It's a small possibility I think, but there's a chance she would spare someone, particularly on the swamp map, which may remind her of the cruelty of her captors, and seeing herself in the place of her captors might briefly allow connection to some humanity as she hunts the survivors. Next, the characters who are quite likely to spare the survivors. These characters in general have a decent amount of humanity left, or some other motive that would lead them to sparing someone. Executioner I weirdly think would be quite likely to spare survivors, just in certain situations. He's one of the more defiant characters after all, and is able to do his own thing in the realm seemingly. He's not really human or has humanity, but that doesn't mean he might not spare someone like the other non-human characters. I do think if he decided within the trials that a survivor deserved to leave, then that's what would happen. He's there to dispense punishment, but equally I think this could extend the other way. As an executioner, it's his job to extend mercy, when necessary too. Potentially this could occur with characters who were particularly altruistic or did something positive, maybe to make up for some kind of guilt they have. Huntress is a character who due to circumstance was left alone and raised in a forest, becoming far more animalistic than human over time. Despite this, she still does have clear humanity within, just a very distorted version of it. However, she does care and have compassion for girls who likely remind her of herself when she was younger, attempting to care for them but ultimately failing within her lore. I think otherwise though she has very little humanity, and puts almost no value on taking the lives of others. There's a slither in there though, likely from the memory of her own mother and the positive impact she had on her. It's possible she spares one of the younger female characters potentially, a bit like she did before when she was attacking villages. I think it might be the same thing. Sure, they're not quite the same age I suppose, but maybe there's some sort of connection there. Susie and Joey of the Legion are tough to judge because we have very little in the way of actual lore for them. They do however appear to show much more resistance initially when the Legion together kill the Storklerk. It's more the influence of Frank and Julie that pushes them to do it. Whilst I do believe the two of them are more in touch with their humanity, there also isn't much in the way of supporting this, aside the lack of ambition and fantasy surrounding becoming a killer one day that the other two share. They are much more influenced by the other two members, and so probably have more regrets and remorse over what happened. Due to their likely fear of both the other Legion members though, as well as the entity, the two of them still follow orders for the most part and rarely spare someone. Pinhead is a character who is likely too far gone, but at one point may have had some humanity within still left to salvage. Nowadays though, as a Cenobite, his goals are quite warped, as he travels and brings pleasure and pain. A servant of Leviathan, the person who was once Elliot is no longer there I think, replaced only with the Pinhead. With that said, I do think he would fairly frequently spare the survivors. They would be spared from the trials, but then sent to the labyrinth, like we see in the Mori. I also think in general he may spare them for similar reasons to others I've mentioned, of it creating a more painful experience. Artist is another character who is far more sympathetic prior to her arrival to the realm. However, it's tough to judge how much of her humanity remains. Nowadays she's just as much crow as she is human seemingly, being transformed by the entity. It's hard to tell with her bird-like twitches and movements how much of Kamina is within. I think there must be something, despite her being very changed and altered by the entity's influence. She still has that artistry and likely passion within her, just with it being used in a bad way. I think there's a good chance she spares someone and empathizes with them in a moment of great suffering, despite the anger and hate she feels. Finally, the characters who are highly likely to spare the survivors. These characters in general have a lot of humanity remaining within, but are forced to do what they do or are heavily conflicted. Trapper is one of the most complex characters with a very varied past that leaves you quite confused when trying to review if he's good or bad in his intentions, with it sort of being different on any given day. Some things point to him being too far gone and having little in the way of humanity remaining, then other things may point to there being something there. In the realm, he's one of few killers known to fight back against the entity, likely due to him disagreeing with what he has to do in the trials, which must surely count for something. He did it at 1.2 to sympathize with his father's workers before they betrayed him, and he consequently killed them. Perhaps his reason for rebelling therefore is the survivors reminding him of his workers, and that good side of him connecting briefly and regretting what is being done. Ultimately, I think he does show that he has a lot left within him, it's just he flips between brutality and caring a bit too much. Irredeemable, I think, but clearly humanity within. So, dependent on the day, and potentially the character, I could see him sparing some of them. Moments he's reminded of his workers, or his mother and uncle, or simply times when he wants to openly defy the entity. Nurse is a character who appears to have humanity, but this is largely contradicted in what we know of her in her backstory. She kills many for a pretty terrible reason, believing the patients of the asylum don't deserve life. Then in other ways, she seems mournful and caring when it comes to the survivors, closing their eyes in her mori caringly, and even having her romance with Wraith. I do think she has humanity within, it's just she's also done a truly terrible deed too. Definitely one of the most complex characters, but equally one that shows far more humanity within than many of the other characters. I do think she would spare survivors more than the others, primarily because of these in-game signs that show a level of care for them, and their well-being almost, like no other character on the killer side. Wraith is a character who's tough to judge, with him clearly being overcome with darkness and being greatly manipulated by the entity. In the realm, he is a shell of who he once was, and likely has very little in the way of humanity remaining within. He's named Wraith partly because of this. He's a ghost of his former self. With this said, he does still appear to be able to feel positive emotion and connect with others, with himself and Nurse having a relationship of some kind. A character who is good but is lacking in the prior humanity he once had. With this said, I do think there's possibility for him to spare a survivor. There's a theory even that he rings his bell to uncloak for the sole purpose of warning the survivors, a sort of redemption for his failure to warn his village being attacked when he was younger. Therefore, I think Wraith likely would spare survivors when he felt he could, even if it meant suffering punishment from the entity. Twins are characters hit by hard times and unfair treatment from birth, being hunted down due to being conjoined. Despite all they had to do to survive, Charlotte at least I think probably has quite a bit of humanity remaining. She is shown to care for her brother, and although doesn't quite show much mercy to the survivors, it's sort of understandable given her situation. In the case of Victor, he probably has none, with him originally dying many years ago, and the one we have in game probably being an entity creation, a creature built up of auric cells simply impersonating the real Victor. Despite this, I do think Charlotte will empathize with the survivor's situation, with it appearing as if she isn't having her vision manipulated and mainly serves to protect Victor. In a game where they do particularly well and Victor isn't harmed, I could see them sparing a lot of survivors on many occasions. That's gonna do it. Let me know your thoughts too, down below.